Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today we are undertaking a deep dive into 50 plus C1 advanced English vocabulary you must know.
Hi there. Yeah, this is a great topic.
It is. And our mission today isn't just to, run through a word list. We want to give you a really comprehensive analysis of the language you need for high-level professional, academic, and just truly sophisticated communication.
That's the key distinction, isn't it? Because at the C1 level, vocabulary moves beyond just, everyday chat.
Right.
It becomes a toolkit for precision. These words are almost like verbal shortcuts. They let you convey complex ideas, nuance, and specific emotional or professional registers in a single stroke instead of using like a whole long description.
That's a great way to put it. A toolkit for precision.
Yeah, and we've curated a list that's packed with terms that native speakers really rely on, especially when they're dealing with abstract concepts or trying to evaluate complex situations.
I really appreciate that focus on precision. I think moving from B2 to C1 isn't just about knowing more words. It's about choosing the right word, the one that fits the exact context.
Absolutely.
So we've organized these terms into 5 functional clusters. The idea is to help you integrate them into your active vocabulary so you can build these conceptual bridges between similar ideas.
Exactly. So think of this less like a list to memorize and more like an architectural blueprint for your high-level communication.
I like that. A blueprint.
So let's start with our first group, which we're calling the clarity cluster. This whole section is about how we articulate opinions, share knowledge, and, make sure the information we're putting out there is understood without any doubt or confusion.
A great place to start. It's all about self-expression. So the first word is assertive. The core definition is being confident and direct. But how do we define that boundary between being assertive and being overbearing or aggressive? That's often the concern.
That boundary is everything. Assertive is, I'd say, almost always a positive trait in professional settings.
Right.
The confidence you display is balanced by respect for other people. If you look at the antonyms like passive or submissive, you realize assertiveness is just the willingness to advocate for your own needs or your viewpoint without apologizing for it.
But also without dominating the conversation.
Exactly. Critically, without dominating.
So an assertive employee doesn't just say, agree to a ridiculous deadline.
Yeah.
They would confidently explain why the current resources make that deadline impossible, and then maybe suggest an alternative, all while being respectful of the manager's goals.
Precisely. It's about effective negotiation and clarity. It's a huge contrast to aggressive behavior, which is more about attacking or dismissing the other person's needs.
Fantastic.
So if a manager praises your assertive but respectful approach, they're acknowledging your strength of character, but also your diplomatic skill. It's really a hallmark of a high-functioning team.
Okay, that makes sense. Building on personal expression then, let's talk about being real. The next word is authentic, meaning real or genuine. It feels like such a simple word, but its application at the C1 level feels vast. It covers everything from like a product's origin to someone's character.
It does. While the definition is simple, genuine, or real, its power is really in its moral weight. We often see it used to describe origin, like you said, authentic Italian food or authentic art.
Sure.
But when you apply it to people, it means aligning your actions with what you say you believe. In leadership, for example, seeking authentic engagement means creating an environment where employees feel comfortable expressing their true opinions.
So the antonyms, fake or false, really highlight why it matters. It's about getting rid of falsehood and building trust.
It absolutely is, and that connects directly to the idea of trustworthiness.
So when people talk about brands seeking authenticity, they mean showing a verifiable origin and transparent business practices, not just, sounding friendly on social media.
Spot on. Now let's dive into the complete opposite end of the clarity spectrum. Let's talk about ambiguous.
Okay, so when a statement or an instruction is ambiguous, it's unclear, or it's open to multiple interpretations.
Yeah, and this is one of those words that feels a bit more, clinical than just saying unclear.
It does. It implies a deeper, maybe a structural failure of communication.
But it's because it points to nuance and maybe even intentionality. If a statement is just vague, which is a common synonym, it might just be an accident.
Right, sloppy wording.
But ambiguous statements often involve careful wording, something designed to avoid commitment. You see it in legal contracts, where lawyers argue over ambiguous wording, or in political speeches, where a politician gives an ambiguous answer so they can later claim they meant something else entirely.
I remember reading about a scientific paper where the findings were labeled ambiguous. It meant the data could actually support two different conclusions, which forced them to do more research. The lack of clarity was the problem itself.
Indeed. And if ambiguity is the disease, then our next word, coherent, is the cure. This term defines something as logical, consistent, and easy to understand. We're always seeking coherent structure in our arguments.
I'm picturing a legal brief or maybe a technical manual. If the information is coherent, the structure just flows perfectly. Point A leads logically to point B.
That's the key, that logical connection between the parts. If an argument is, say, illogical or confusing, the antonyms, it lacks coherence. And the audience has to spend all this mental energy just trying to figure out the link.
You lose them.
You lose them. Coherence implies that the thought process itself is organized and rationally presented, which is absolutely fundamental in advanced writing.
Okay, now let's talk about moving information around. We often just use the word share, but at the C1 level, we have disseminate. This means to spread information widely.
And disseminate signals a deliberate, often formal, and large-scale effort. You don't disseminate a photo of your lunch. You disseminate research findings, or policy changes, or critical public health information. The sheer scale and formality are what distinguish it from share. For instance, the rapid dissemination of misinformation via social media is a major modern concern.
And what about when an institution actively tries to stop that from happening?
Yeah.
To stop that flow?
Well, then they'd attempt to hide or suppress the information. Those are the antonyms. Disseminate implies agency, an active choice to broadcast knowledge, and it's crucial for academic and professional reporting.
Okay, so from sending information out, let's pivot to pulling it in. The verb elicit. This means to draw out a reaction or an answer, often with some skill or effort.
Elicit is a powerful active verb. It suggests the response isn't just freely given, but it has to be drawn out, often through very careful questioning or strategic actions.
I see.
A well-crafted survey is designed to elicit specific feedback. The goal of a detective's questioning is to elicit the truth. It suggests a careful, targeted extraction.
So if I just tell a joke and people laugh, that's just a reaction. But if I carefully set up a long story with a punchline that is specifically designed to make people laugh, I have successfully elicited that reaction.
Exactly. And that distinction leads us beautifully to the next word, which is provoke. This also means to cause a reaction, but often with an implication of intensity or even conflict.
I see provoke used a lot in political discussions. Provoking a debate or provoking strong criticism. Does it carry a heavier emotional weight than elicit?
It typically does, yeah. While you can elicit something gentle, like a smile, provoke often implies stirring something up, like a fight or anger or a deep intellectual disagreement.
Okay.
The source material mentions how the smell of old books provoked strong, immediate memories. It's a catalyst, a kind of immediate trigger. When we use the antonyms like calm or suppress, we're talking about actively neutralizing that reaction that's been created.
All right, let's move to how we handle arguments, starting with refute. To refute means to prove something is wrong, often in a very formal setting.
This is a cornerstone of academic integrity. You don't just say something is wrong. You provide compelling evidence to refute it. A defense lawyer has to refute accusations with counter evidence. A scientific community has to refute false claims with empirical data. If you fail to refute a claim, you're implicitly confirming or verifying it, which really highlights the importance of this verb in formal contexts.
So it's an act of definitive intellectual dismissal, and it has to be based on proof.
That's it. And sometimes the opposite task is necessary, getting your point to stick. That's where we reiterate.
To reiterate is to repeat for emphasis or clarity. This isn't just saying something twice because you forgot you said it.
No, it's a conscious, targeted repetition because the information is crucial. Project managers reiterate key milestones in every single meeting. Teachers reiterate the 3 main rules before an exam. The repetition is all about reinforcement.
The context often implies, I am repeating this because it is vital you remember it.
Exactly. And I find that reiterate is much more common in formal minutes or emails than just saying repeat. It signals importance. It does. Now, shifting from stated points to unstated meanings, we have implication. This means a hidden meaning or a consequence that's suggested rather than stated outright.
So when a report discusses the serious implications of climate change, they're referring to the severe consequences that follow from the findings, even if those consequences aren't detailed on every single page.
Exactly. Implication often forces the listener or the reader to connect the dots. In political analysis, if a leader's plan has political implications, it suggests underlying power struggles or future policy shifts that haven't been made public yet.
So power of the word is that it forces the audience to consider the unsaid consequences.
Yes. And finally, to round out our clarity cluster, we deal with the initial assessment of truth. Plausible. If a statement is plausible, it's believable and reasonable.
Okay, so plausible is about that surface-level logic and credibility, but not necessarily confirmation.
Right. It passes the sniff test, so to speak. A witness providing a plausible account means it sounds reasonable and consistent, even if it hasn't been definitively proven true.
So the classic example is the difference between an implausible excuse, one that just doesn't make any sense, and a plausible one.
Exactly. You use plausible when the internal logic is sound. Even if the facts aren't entirely substantiated, it sets a much lower bar than being proven true. The antonym, improbable, really hits that home. It might be possible, but it just doesn't seem likely or reasonable.
So we've now covered the language we use to make sure our thoughts are clearly expressed, their meaning is understood, and we can assess their initial truthfulness.
Absolutely. That sets the stage perfectly.
It does. We've established the language for clear communication. But what happens when that clear argument needs to be evaluated for its real-world success and trustworthiness?
Well, then we need to transition from the language of description to the language of practical action and quality control.
And that takes us to our second section, evaluating the practical and the possible.
Right. This next cluster gives us the vocabulary for complex decision-making, for allocating resources, and for the rigorous testing of claims. Let's start with a crucial trio for assessing any new project: feasible, viable, and pragmatic. Let's begin with feasible.
Feasible means possible and practical. I usually associate it with resources, like, is the plan feasible given the time, the budget, the people we have?
Correct. Feasible is often the first hurdle. Can we actually do this? The synonyms, like workable or achievable, they emphasize the mechanics of the task. A rescue mission is feasible if the team can get to the location safely. It's all about the immediate potential for execution.
But I've noticed feasible doesn't guarantee long-term success, which I guess brings us to viable.
And this is a critical distinction for C1 learners. While feasible answers, can we do it? Viable asks, will it succeed and survive?
Ah, I see.
Viable often carries a strong connotation of financial sustainability or maybe even biological capacity. A business plan might be technically feasible to implement, but if the market isn't there, it's not financially viable.
So if I build a small, complex machine, the construction itself is feasible.
Right.
But if I can't sell that machine for a profit, the business is not viable.
Precisely. Viable addresses the ability to live and function successfully in the long term, which makes the antonyms unworkable or unsustainable very fitting. It's a much more rigorous test of an idea than just feasibility.
And when you approach a problem trying to maximize both viability and feasibility, you're adopting a pragmatic approach.
Pragmatic is maybe one of the most important C1 adjectives because it describes a mindset. It means sensible and realistic, dealing with problems based on practical results rather than, abstract theory or idealistic notions.
So a pragmatic solution to traffic congestion might involve tolls. They might be unpopular, but they're effective.
Yes, and that contrasts sharply with idealistic plans that might look good on paper but just fail in reality. The pragmatic leader makes hard, realistic choices, even if they aren't the most popular or theoretically perfect ones. It's a rejection of purely theoretical thinking.
It's accepting real-world constraints. I can see that. If you're in a meeting and someone starts arguing over some complex, beautiful theory that won't actually work, you need the language of pragmatism to bring them back down to earth.
Exactly.
Now we move into the realm of truth assessment, starting with credible. We touched on plausible earlier, so how does credible differ, since they both sort of mean believable?
Well, plausible often relates to the internal logic of a statement or an explanation. It sounds reasonable.
Okay.
Credible, on the other hand, relates more directly to the source, the evidence, the witness, the reputation of the speaker. Credible means trustworthy. If a source is credible, we inherently trust their information.
So if the findings from a paper sound plausible, but the researchers have a history of questionable ethics, the results might still lack credibility.
That's the distinction. The source is everything. Credible is a judgment on trustworthiness. If evidence is unreliable, it's not credible. No. And once you have credible information, the next logical step is often to scrutinize it.
Scrutinize. To examine something very, very carefully. That suggests an intense meticulous level of review.
Absolutely. It implies a detailed inspection, looking for errors or discrepancies. Regulators scrutinize financial reports. Scientists scrutinize datasets for outliers. Before you sign any contract, you must scrutinize every single clause. The antonyms, overlook or ignore, show that this is all about deliberate attention to fine detail.
And when we describe that examination process, we use the word rigorous.
Rigorous describes the quality and the intensity of the process itself. It means strict, demanding, and highly thorough. Rigorous testing ensures a product meets the highest standards. Rigorous research methodology leaves no room for bias or error.
So if you're applying for a highly technical job, you should expect rigorous training.
You should. It's the complete opposite of an easy, lax, or lenient process.
Okay. And even when presented with rigorous and credible evidence, a lot of people still maintain a skeptical attitude.
That's the mindset of doubt. Being skeptical means you are unconvinced and you require further proof. A good investor maintains a skeptical attitude toward overly optimistic market forecasts. And this isn't negativity, it's an intellectual safeguard.
So a skeptical approach slows decisions down because it demands verification, but it can prevent costly mistakes in the long run.
It can. And that skepticism means that any claims have to be substantiated.
To substantiate.
Yeah.
That's the act of providing the evidence needed to prove or support a claim.
Yes, and it's a very formal verb. You would use it in policy briefs, academic papers, or official complaints. You must substantiate your expense report with receipts. The data substantiates the theoretical model. If you can't substantiate your claims, they're just speculative, and you open yourself up to being disproved.
So, if a claim is plausible and comes from a credible source, the final stage before acceptance is substantiation through rigorous scrutiny. That whole sequence makes perfect sense.
It provides a complete conceptual framework for advanced research and, for vetting information.
And finally, in this section, we have intuitive. This deals with knowledge that doesn't require all the scrutiny we just talked about.
Right. Intuitive knowledge is based on natural feeling or instinct rather than calculation or formal analysis.
We hear this a lot in technology and design. An intuitive interface is one where the user just immediately knows how to operate it without a manual.
Exactly. Or a good leader often relies on an intuitive sense of timing or team morale, which comes from experience, not from reading data points. It is the opposite of an analytical or calculated approach.
It's the language of instinct versus the language of data. That wraps up our evaluation section pretty well. We now have the tools to discuss practicality, trustworthiness, and the quality of evidence.
And now we shift our focus to dynamics. How things change, how conditions influence outcomes, and how we handle, or sometimes handle poorly, the negative consequences that arise.
Which brings us to section 3, impact, change, and mitigation. Let's jump right into managing negative outcomes with our first pair of verbs for relief, alleviate and mitigate. Starting with alleviate.
To alleviate means to reduce or ease something unpleasant. This typically addresses an existing discomfort or suffering. So taking a painkiller alleviates a headache.
Right.
Organizing your tasks can alleviate feelings of stress. The focus is on relief, making the current situation immediately less painful or severe.
And mitigate. The source distinguishes this as reducing the severity,
Right.
and it's often used in the context of risk or future damage.
That's the crucial difference. Mitigate is often proactive or preventative. We don't usually mitigate a headache. We mitigate the risk of a headache by maybe drinking less coffee.
I see.
Companies implement security protocols to mitigate the risk of a data breach. Training is introduced to mitigate workplace accidents. It's all about reducing the potential impact or severity of something that hasn't fully happened yet.
That's a wonderful distinction. Alleviate is relief now, mitigate is damage control for the future. And in both cases, the goal is the opposite of intensifying or increasing the negative outcome.
Precisely. Now, for the vocabulary of a definite negative impact.
Detrimental.
This is a powerful adjective. It means causing harm. It just feels stronger and more formal than simply saying bad.
It absolutely signals a serious negative consequence. A lack of consistent sleep is detrimental to long-term productivity. Exposure to false information is detrimental to public discourse. When you use this word, you're emphasizing a damaging effect that often requires some kind of policy change or intervention. It's the formal opposite of beneficial.
And when those negative impacts are unintended, we often call them repercussions.
A repercussion is an often unintended negative consequence that follows an action, a decision, or a crisis. They usually imply a kind of ripple effect.
Okay.
So the decision to cut the budget had unexpected repercussions on staff morale and training quality. Repercussions are those long-tail negative results that weren't fully considered in the planning stage.
That word carries some weight. It suggests a chain reaction of negative events. It's much more evocative than just side effects.
It implies seriousness and complexity. And speaking of things that weaken complexity, let's discuss undermine.
To undermine means to weaken something, often gradually or secretly. It's almost always an abstract kind of weakening.
That's the nuance. You don't typically undermine a physical structure. You undermine confidence or reputation or health or authority.
Right.
Stress can undermine a person's ability to concentrate. Constant complaints can undermine a manager's authority. The action is often subtle and corrosive, in direct opposition to actions that strengthen or support.
It's a great C1 word because it describes complex political and psychological dynamics far better than just saying it made it weaker.
I agree. Now let's shift to defining positive conditions. The word is conducive.
Conducive. So making something easier or more likely to happen, creating an ideal environment.
This is used to describe the necessary conditions for success. A quiet library atmosphere is conducive to focused study. Management must create a culture that's conducive to innovation. When you use this word, you're identifying the environmental factors that help a positive outcome happen.
So a lack of structure, by contrast, would be damaging or harmful, the antonyms.
Exactly. Moving on to natural dynamics, we have fluctuate.
Fluctuate means to change continuously, often up and down, like a wave.
And it is almost exclusively used for measurable variables. Stock prices fluctuate based on investor sentiment, temperatures fluctuate throughout the day, your motivation can fluctuate depending on your workload. It emphasizes constant movement, in contrast to something that stabilizes or remains constant.
And if you don't want that continuous change, you have to make sure you don't deviate.
To deviate is to stray or change direction from an expected path, a rule, or a set of instructions. In technical fields, it's absolutely paramount not to deviate from safety protocols.
Right.
During a presentation, if the audience starts asking off-topic questions, the discussion might deviate from the main point. It's the linguistic tool for describing a departure from the norm or the standard.
It signifies a planned path being abandoned. And the need to deviate often implies that the original plan was either flawed or some external factors intervened.
Precisely. And finally, in this section on change, we have the ultimate certainty, inevitable.
If something is inevitable, it is certain to happen. It's unavoidable.
This is a powerful concept because it removes agency. The source points out that conflict is inevitable in large teams and that technological change is inevitable in our society. It's used when you're acknowledging a future outcome that just cannot be prevented, only may be prepared for.
So if something is preventable or avoidable, it loses that emotional and conceptual weight that inevitable carries.
It does.
That concludes our cluster on impact and change. We now have the language to discuss how conditions influence outcomes, how things change, and how we can reduce negative results.
Our next step is to master the language of size, complexity, and defining what is truly essential. We're moving from the dynamics of change to the assessment of scope.
And this brings us to section 4, scale, detail, and importance. Let's start with words that define scope and completeness, beginning with comprehensive.
Comprehensive means complete and including everything necessary. This is a word for thoroughness. A comprehensive report leaves no stone unturned. Comprehensive training covers every required aspect of the job. It's high praise for anything that has to be detailed and whole. If a summary is just limited or incomplete, it can't be described as comprehensive.
Following completeness, we talk about magnitude, substantial.
Substantial means large or important. The beauty of this word is its versatility. It can quantify size or importance. We can talk about substantial funding, which is about size, or substantial evidence, which is about importance.
I see.
It implies something significant or considerable, which makes it far more sophisticated than just saying a lot of.
So if a finding is substantial, it has weight and influence on the overall conclusion, not just bulk.
Exactly. Now let's explore 3 distinct ways to describe widespread presence: prevalent, widespread, and predominant. Let's focus on prevalent first.
Prevalent. This means common or widespread, usually referencing an issue or a pattern of behavior you see frequently within a defined group.
Right. If you talk about a certain style of architecture being prevalent in old cities, you mean it's common there. Internet scams are increasingly prevalent means they're happening frequently among users. It emphasizes frequency and commonality.
And widespread. Does that focus more on the geographical or physical distribution of something?
It does. Widespread focuses on something being found or distributed over a large area, often emphasizing the scale of access or agreement. There's widespread support for the new policy across the country. Internet access is widespread. A lack of communication often leads to widespread confusion.
So while it's similar to prevalent, widespread often implies a greater physical or distributional reach.
It does. And finally, predominant. This one sounds like it refers to the one that is both the most common and the most dominant.
That's spot on. It means the most common or the most powerful element. In a mixed economy, one sector might be predominant. When we analyze opinions, we look for the predominant viewpoint, which is the majority or most influential one. It asserts a position of power or majority, contrasting with a minor or subordinate element. Okay, moving from scale to detail, let's examine complexity with the word intricate.
Intricate means very detailed and complicated, usually because of many small, interconnected parts. Think of an intricate clock mechanism or an intricate legal argument. It highlights a complexity that arises from detailed interweaving. It's the direct opposite of simple or straightforward.
So if a problem is merely complicated, it might just have a few difficult steps.
Yeah.
But if it's intricate, it has many fine, interconnected details that all have to be handled perfectly.
Yes, it requires finesse and attention to detail. And now for the contrast to abstraction, tangible.
Tangible means real and concrete, something you can physically touch or clearly observe.
This is a favorite word in business and policy, where people are constantly seeking tangible results. If a manager wants tangible improvements in the next quarter, they want things they can actually measure and prove, not just theoretical good feelings.
So the word force is a grounding in reality. It contrasts with abstract or intangible concepts that are hard to grasp.
Exactly. Now, for a word defining non-negotiable importance, integral.
Integral, meaning essential and necessary.
This is one of the highest compliments for necessity. Something is integral if it is a fundamental part of the whole, and if you remove it, the whole thing would fail. Trust is integral to any healthy working relationship. This training is integral to your job performance. It's much, much stronger than just important.
It sounds like a necessary building block. If you remove the integral part, the whole structure collapses.
That's the perfect analogy. And finally, for a high-level verb of comparison, juxtapose.
To juxtapose means to place things side by side specifically for contrast or for a comparative effect.
And this is a common tool for analysis. A documentary might juxtapose the wealth of the city center with the poverty of the suburbs to make a political statement. An architect might juxtapose new, sleek designs with historical structures. It's an intellectual act of forced comparison, demanding that the audience analyze the differences and similarities that arise from their close proximity.
That set of words has really armed us with the language of description, moving from scale and completeness to complexity and necessity.
Excellent. For our final section, we'll move into the social and institutional realm, using high-level vocabulary to define people's character, their status, their behavior, and their compliance with rules.
This is section 5, character, status, and legal standing. We'll start with positive descriptors of people, beginning with conscientious.
Conscientious means careful, responsible, and hardworking. It implies a high degree of diligence and moral uprightness in how you do your tasks. It's a word that's highly valued in references. A conscientious employee takes their duties seriously and makes a conscientious effort to meet all deadlines.
And the antonym would be careless or irresponsible.
Yeah.
It really denotes reliability and thoroughness.
It does. And following diligent effort comes demonstrated skill. Proficient.
Right. Proficient means skilled and capable.
And this is task-specific mastery. You are proficient in a language, proficient at a programming skill, or proficient in complex negotiation. It's about competency gained through consistent practice, signifying a C1 level ability to execute a task effectively.
And that contrasts with someone who's unskilled or just a novice.
Exactly. The ability to apply that skill in many different areas leads to being versatile.
Versatile means able to adapt to many different situations or tasks.
Right. A versatile tool can perform multiple functions. A versatile team member can step into several different roles as needed. It signifies flexibility and adaptability, which is the opposite of being specialized or inflexible.
And the quality that drives change and improvement. Innovative.
Innovative means creative and new, focusing on original ideas or methods. Companies thrive on innovative products that disrupt the market. It requires innovative thinking to solve problems that traditional methods just couldn't address. It sets something apart as truly original, rejecting the traditional or the ordinary.
Okay, now we shift to outlook and behavior, starting with the negative. Hostile.
Hostile means unfriendly or aggressive. It can describe a person's attitude, or it can describe an environment. Facing a hostile work environment means dealing with aggression and unfriendliness on a regular basis.
Sure.
In a formal context, a company might face a hostile takeover attempt. The language is sharp, denoting aggression and antagonism.
Next, the word for something truly dull. Mundane.
Mundane means ordinary, routine, or boring. People often complain that necessary tasks, like filing or responding to too many emails, are mundane. It's used to describe routines or activities that lack excitement or significance, contrasting with the extraordinary or the exciting.
And a word that sounds positive but usually isn't. Notorious.
Yes, notorious means well-known, but specifically for something negative or infamous. You are notorious for being bad, not good. A city might be notorious for its unpredictable traffic congestion. A business leader might become notorious after a public scandal.
So if you're known for positive things, you're celebrated. If you are notorious, you are infamous.
That's it. Let's discuss the classic pair that defines general outlook: optimistic and pessimistic.
These adjectives frame future expectations. An optimistic person or forecast is hopeful and positive, expecting favorable outcomes.
Right. An optimistic market report suggests economic growth is likely. And conversely, pessimistic means expecting negative outcomes, often being gloomy or negative about results. These two terms really provide the linguistic scaffolding for most high-level forecasting and analysis of attitude.
And describing hesitant behavior, we have reluctant.
Reluctant means unwilling or hesitant. If a politician reluctantly accepted the nomination, they showed hesitation or resistance. It's a great word to capture that subtle unwillingness or resistance to an action, which is the opposite of being eager or willing.
Now, let's move into status and structure with subordinate.
Subordinate means lower in rank or less important. In a hierarchy, a junior employee is subordinate to the manager. Subordinate tasks must be completed, but they hold less importance than the primary goals. It defines a structural relationship of ranking, contrasting with superior or dominant.
And describing a state of weakness or exposure, vulnerable.
Vulnerable means open to harm, attack, or damage. This can be used for physical systems, such as a network being vulnerable to hacking, or for groups of people. Children and the elderly are often considered vulnerable online. It defines a state of being unprotected and requires proactive protection or mitigation.
Finally, 3 words relating to rules and legality. First up, legitimate.
Legitimate means lawful, acceptable, or reasonable. A legitimate concern is one that is valid and acceptable for discussion. A business operates legitimately if it complies with all laws. It is inherently tied to lawfulness and validity, contrasting with illegal or false.
And if that legitimacy is breached, we have a violation.
A violation is the breaking of a rule or law, an offense, or a breach. Whether it's a minor parking violation or a major safety violation, it signifies non-compliance with established standards. This is critical terminology in compliance and regulatory fields.
And finally, the highest praise for a successful business venture. Lucrative.
Lucrative means producing a lot of profit. It's profitable or rewarding. Securing a lucrative contract is a major business achievement. It's a formal adjective used almost exclusively to describe highly profitable business ventures, contrasting with unprofitable or even worthless endeavors.
That was an extremely comprehensive and I would say rigorous deep dive covering over 50 C1 vocabulary words. We've really moved them from being, dictionary definitions to powerful tools for communicating nuance in academic and professional contexts.
The key takeaway, as we've discussed, is that true mastery comes from context. You now have the precise terms to replace these long descriptive phrases, which offers immediate clarity and sophistication. Using detrimental instead of very bad for or proficient instead of just good at immediately elevates your communication.
That efficiency truly does define advanced language use. So for you, our listener, here is a final challenge this week. Try to take 3 words from different clusters, perhaps pragmatic, assertive, and mitigate, and actively try to integrate them into 3 distinct communication moments this week. Practice using them in context.
And here's a thought for reflection as you continue your journey towards C2. If communication is integral to success, how often do we allow ourselves to mistake a plausible explanation for a substantiated truth? The depth of your vocabulary really dictates the depth of your analysis.
That's a fantastic thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this in-depth analysis of advanced language usage.
We truly hope this discussion was conducive to significantly improving your vocabulary and your overall communication skills.
And if you found this useful, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the Learning Loose Lab YouTube channel for more detailed guides just like this one.